I found my husband's old journal and realized he was responsible for the accident that left my sister permanently disabled. The irony of my life is a cold, sharp knife that I now carry everywhere. For 12 years, my sister, Emily, has lived with chronic pain and limited mobility following a severe spinal injury. For 5 years, I've been married to Ben, the man I swore was the kindest, most selfless person I had ever met. Ben was my rock through all of Emily's surgeries, all the exhausting physiotherapy appointments, and all the financial struggles that came with her permanent disability. He was the one who built the wheelchair ramp at my parents' house, who researched alternative treatments, and who always reminded me that Emily's spirit was stronger than her body. His support was the only reason my family and my sanity survived the last decade. He was the hero of our tragedy, and his compassion was what convinced me to marry him. The accident itself happened 13 years ago. Emily was crossing a rural road late at night after a local charity event. A car speeding down a hill failed the stop, hit her, and drove away. It was a classic hit and run, a cold, unsolved crime that shattered our family. The driver was never caught. The police had a blurry description of a dark sedan and nothing more. That mystery, that gaping hole of injustice, defined our family's trajectory. It took away Emily's ability to walk normally and stole my parents' retirement savings, forcing them to liquidate everything to cover her medical costs. We accepted that the perpetrator was a phantom, a faceless coward who got away. The truth lay hidden in a box of college mementos that Ben had stored in our attic. We were clearing out the space last week to make room for holiday storage. The box was taped shut, labeled simply Urbana 2012. Inside were old textbooks, faded concert tickets, and at the bottom, a small, black, spiral-bound journal with a leather cover. I picked it up, expecting to find innocent sketches or study notes. I opened it and saw Ben's handwriting, neat and familiar. The early entries were exactly what I expected. Complaints about exams, typical young adult anxiety. But then, the entries changed abruptly in the fall of 2012. My heart started to beat faster as I realized the date was exactly 2 weeks after Emily's accident. The writing was frantic, almost illegible with desperation. The entry was dated October 28th, 2012. It began, "It was me. I didn't stop. I couldn't." I sank onto the dusty attic floor, the air thick and cold. I reread the entry 3 times, searching for an alternative meaning, a metaphor, a terrible dream, but the detail was agonizingly specific. Ben wrote about driving his father's dark sedan, about being tired and reckless, about hearing the horrible sound of impact and seeing a young woman fall. He wrote about the moment he saw the reflection of a small, distinct gold ribbon, the ribbon Emily wore for the charity event, in his rearview mirror. He wrote about pulling over miles away, shaking uncontrollably, and realizing that calling the police would mean destroying his future. He confessed to wiping down the car later that night and burying the damaged front light casing in a construction site across town. The guilt was suffocating him, and he had poured it all onto the page. The journal wasn't just a record, it was a screaming confession. My husband, the gentle man who brought Emily flowers every week, who helped her up the stairs when her pain flared, who financially supported my parents' medical debt, was the faceless criminal, the coward who fled the scene and condemned my sister to a life of pain. The betrayal was so deep it felt like internal bleeding. He wasn't just lying about an affair. He had built our entire relationship on the unearned moral capital of his support for the victim he had created. Every act of kindness he showed my family over the last 5 years was not love, it was penance. Every dime he spent on their care was guilt money. And I had married him, thanking him endlessly for his compassion, unknowingly celebrating the man who was the source of all our suffering. I carried the journal downstairs, the pages burning in my hands. I hid it deep inside my desk drawer and tried to maintain a normal evening. When Ben came home, I watched him meticulously. I watched him kneel down to help my daughter tie her shoe, the same hands that had gripped the steering wheel and fled the scene. I watched him gently ask Emily about her progress. The performance was flawless, polished by years of agonizing practice. He lived his life believing his secret was perfectly safe and that his devotion had somehow earned him forgiveness for the crime. But the secret wasn't safe anymore. I held the truth, the confession, and now I had to choose: protect the man I loved, or finally deliver justice to the sister I cherished and the family he had financially ruined. The choice felt impossible, a cruel cosmic joke played on my soul. I spent 2 days functioning on autopilot, the journal a lead weight in my desk drawer, before I could articulate the first word of the confrontation. I waited until the children were at school and Emily was safely at her physical therapy session. The house was unnervingly silent. I walked into the kitchen where Ben was making coffee, exactly the way he did every morning, and the sight of his domestic, reliable routine was the final, sickening trigger. He looked up, his face relaxed, and offered me my usual mug. I didn't take the mug. I walked past him to the dining table, pulled the small black journal from my bag, and dropped it onto the wood. The thud of the book sounded deafening in the silence. "Tell me about Urbana 2012, Ben?" I said, my voice low and vibrating with a deadly calm. "Tell me about the gold ribbon you saw in your rearview mirror?" The mug slipped from his hand, shattering on the tile floor. The hot coffee pooled around the shards, creating a messy, graphic metaphor for the disaster he had wrought. He didn't deny it. He didn't ask what I was talking about. His body went rigid, all the kindness and composure leaching away instantly, replaced by a defeated terror I recognized from the journal entry. He just stared at the book, knowing the decades-long performance was finally over. He sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands. "Oh, God, Clara, I knew this day would come. I thought I had buried it deep enough." He confessed everything again. The narrative rushed and agonized. He had been reckless, distracted, coming home late after a fight with his own father. He confirmed the exact time and place, the detail of the light casing, the cold black terror of seeing a body fall but not stopping. He admitted the initial act was pure panic, but the subsequent silence became a deliberate, active choice, reinforced by my family's tragedy. "I saw the news reports, Clara. I saw your parents on TV pleading for the driver. I knew it was Emily. I knew I had destroyed your family. And then, when I met you months later, I couldn't stop myself. You were so kind, so shattered, and I felt this overwhelming, terrible need to fix what I had broken." His elaborate 5-year performance of the loving, supportive wasn't a mask of indifference. It was a desperate, calculated penance. Every dime he spent on Emily's care, every hour he spent building the ramp, every weekend he drove her to the specialist, it was all a continuation of his confession, a desperate, silent attempt to atone for the life he had stolen from her. I stayed, Clara, because I had to. I loved you, but I had to pay the debt. My love for you was the only way I could be close enough to help her, to take on the financial and emotional burden I created. I became the best man I could be for you only because I was the worst man to Emily. I listened, my blood running cold. His logic was twisted, an exercise in moral accounting that made my skin crawl. He had traded his freedom for the illusion of my love and the chance to silently manage the catastrophe he had caused. The crime wasn't just hitting her. The crime was inserting himself into our family's tragedy as the benevolent savior, stealing our gratitude and exploiting our grief for his own moral relief. The next point was legal, cold, and necessary. What is the legal truth, Ben? Can you still be charged? He looked up, his eyes haunted. He admitted he'd checked this many times over the years. The statute of limitations for felony hit and run in that state was 10 years.
The accident happened 13 years ago. The criminal charge was likely expired. He couldn't go to jail for the original crime. But the moral question remained. The insurance fraud, the civil case we never pursued, and the lack of justice for Emily. My family was financially ruined because the perpetrator was never found, and now my husband was confessing the truth, but the legal window for criminal justice was shut. The devastation was twofold. Emily would never get justice for the man who ran, and my entire relationship was a lie built on a debt he was paying off, not a love we shared. I looked at the coffee shards on the floor and the man weeping across the table, no longer seeing my husband, but the perpetrator who escaped justice and was now begging for mercy. My decision was excruciating but simple. Emily deserved the truth, and my parents deserved to be financially whole. The statute of limitations didn't matter. The truth had to come out even if it meant destroying the illusion of safety I had built for our own children. You will tell Emily. You will tell my parents. And you will arrange for every single medical debt they incurred, every surgery, every therapy session to be paid back with interest. You will face the consequences, Ben. You have taken my sister's life, and now you have taken my marriage. The penance ends now. The justice begins.
The confrontation with Ben was the prelude. The true agonizing climax was the conversation with my sister. I knew the truth would be a second profound trauma for Emily, not only confirming her injury was deliberate, but revealing that the man who had been her greatest supporter for 5 years was the one responsible. I asked Ben to leave the house immediately, giving him 1 week to find temporary accommodation and instructing him to contact a solicitor to prepare for the full financial restitution. I spent the next day preparing my parents and Emily, meticulously choosing my words, trying to build a safe landing for a truth that was guaranteed to shatter them. I sat with my sister and my parents in the same living room where Ben had built the wheelchair ramp. I didn't start with Ben. I started with the journal and the cold, horrifying entry from 2012. My mother wept instantly, sinking into my father's shoulder, the realization of the phantom driver's identity finally being named, shattering her years of silent grief. But Emily's reaction was the most searing. She didn't cry. She stared at me, then at the empty space where Ben usually sat, and her face contorted with a complex emotion that wasn't just pain, but a blinding, ferocious anger. "He knew," Emily said, the words heavy and slow. "He knew every time I cried. He knew every time he wheeled me out for therapy. Every single act of kindness was a lie. He didn't just injure me, Clara. He colonized our pain. He used my broken body as his moral currency. His anger was not just at the hit and run, but at the grotesque, invasive act of penance that had been the foundation of our last 5 years. She felt used, exploited, and robbed of her authentic recovery process. My mother was angry at Ben for the crime. Emily was angry at me for marrying him, for allowing his lie to infect our sanctuary. That was the deepest wound, my sister's sudden, cold separation from me, the silent question in her eyes asking why I hadn't seen the monster behind the compassion. The divorce was swift and devastatingly cold. Ben did not contest anything. He knew his guilt was absolute. The primary legal battle was the civil suit. We forced him to pay back every dime my parents had spent on Emily's medical bills over the last decade, with full interest. He was also responsible for funding a trust that would cover Emily's future long-term care, her specialized housing, and her financial independence. It was a staggering sum, requiring Ben to liquidate all his assets, his savings, and his retirement fund.
He was left financially ruined, but that was the only measure of justice available, the only way to replace the stolen years and the crushing debt he inflicted upon my family. He signed the papers with the same defeated air he carried when I found the journal, a man finally paying a debt he should have settled 13 years ago. The marriage ended. I watched him drive away in a rental car, stripped of his wealth, his identity, and his freedom, though his prison was a moral, financial one, not a physical one. I was left alone with our children, trying to explain the sudden disappearance of the man who had been the most consistent presence in their lives. I didn't tell them he was a hit-and-run driver. I told them that their father had made a very serious mistake a long time ago and was now required to spend his life fixing it, and that our family had to be rebuilt on the foundation of honesty. The shame I felt, the shame of having been so wrong, so trusting, so blind, will always remain. It took years for the family to truly heal. My parents were financially secure, relieved of the crippling debt, but they never fully recovered from the moral shock. Emily slowly forgave me, but the warmth of our sisterly bond is replaced by a careful, guarded respect. She is financially independent now, but the disability remains a constant, stark reminder of the reckless teenager who got away. I learned the hardest lesson about love. You cannot build an authentic relationship on a debt of guilt. Ben's devotion to me was real, but it was perpetually poisoned by his penance to Emily. He loved me because I was the only way he could save himself from his guilt, not because he was truly free to offer a whole heart. I look at my life now, the messy, sometimes quiet, always honest single life I built for my children, and I know the price of the truth was the destruction of everything I had, but it was the only path to saving the family I had always loved. The journal is gone, burned to ash, but the scars it exposed are what finally set us all free.